Hi there, and welcome back to the garden. I'm Eleanor. Before we begin, I'd love to know a little about your space, so tell me down in the comments, do you have a big garden bed to work with, or is it more of a porch, a patio, a balcony, or just a doorstep with room for a few pots? I ask because today's video is especially for that second group, and honestly, there are so many more of you than people realize. Here's something I want you to hear clearly. Right at the start, you do not need a garden bed to have a genuinely gorgeous, colorful, welcoming front entrance. Not one bit. Some of the most beautiful, most photographed entryways I've ever seen belong to renters, to apartment dwellers, to folks with nothing but a concrete stoop and a few containers, and they absolutely glow with color all summer long. A pot of flowers by the door does something almost magical. It says welcome before a single word is spoken, and it can transform even the plainest entrance into something warm and inviting. So today I'm sharing 10 wonderful plants that thrive in pots and planters, no garden bed required, plants that are easy, forgiving, and absolutely stunning in a container. I'll walk you through exactly how to combine them for that lush, professionally arranged look, and how to keep them happy all season. And do stay to the end, because the last one might just be the toughest, most forgiving container plant there is. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and if you love an easy, beautiful space, garden bed or not, tap that subscribe button. It truly helps this little channel grow. All right, let's fill some pots with beauty. Let's begin with the classic, beloved, absolutely foolproof container flower, the geranium, botanically known as pelargonium. If you've ever admired a European windowsill or balcony absolutely dripping with cheerful red, pink, or white blooms, you are very likely looking at geraniums. They are, quite simply, one of the most reliable, most rewarding container plants in all of gardening. They form neat, rounded mounds of scalloped, often subtly patterned leaves, topped continuously, from late spring all the way to frost, with round clusters of vivid flowers in red, pink, salmon, white, and lavender. And unlike some flowers that need constant deadheading and fussing, geraniums bloom and bloom with remarkably little intervention. They love full sun. The more sun, the more flowers. And they're genuinely drought-tolerant for a flowering plant, actually preferring the soil to dry out somewhat between waterings rather than staying constantly soggy. That makes them wonderfully forgiving if you occasionally forget to water, which, let's be honest, happens to every one of us now and then. For your container design, geraniums make a spectacular filler, that middle layer of color in a well-designed pot, or they can stand entirely on their own, one variety, one color, in a simple pot by the door, and still look completely stunning. A pair of matching geranium pots flanking your entrance is one of the simplest, most classic ways to make a front door feel welcoming. My tip: snap or snip off the spent flower clusters as they fade, right at the base of the stem. It's a small habit, but it keeps the plant looking tidy and redirects its energy into producing even more blooms. And in fall, before the first frost, you can actually bring a favorite geranium indoors to a sunny window and keep it going as a houseplant all winter, then move it back outside next spring, a free plant year after year. Classic, cheerful, and remarkably forgiving, geraniums are the perfect container starting point. Now let's add some soft, cascading color with number 2. Number 2 brings us one of the most generous, most colorful bloomers you can put in any container: petunias. Petunias are the very definition of more flowers than you can count. A single well-grown petunia plant can produce dozens upon dozens of trumpet-shaped blooms simultaneously in nearly every color under the sun: deep purples, hot pinks, sunny yellows, crisp whites, and dramatic near blacks, plus countless stripes and bicolors. The modern trailing and wave-type varieties are especially wonderful for containers because they cascade generously over the edge of a pot or hanging basket, creating that lush, overflowing spiller effect that makes a container garden look professionally arranged. They absolutely love full sun and warmth, and they bloom their hearts out from late spring right through to the first frost, given the right care. That care really comes down to 2 things: consistent water, since containers dry out faster than garden beds, especially in summer heat and regular feeding, because all that non-stop blooming takes real energy. A diluted liquid fertilizer every week or two keeps petunias performing at their absolute peak. For your design, petunias are the classic spiller in a mixed container, planted around the edge, where they'll tumble beautifully over the rim, or massed together in a hanging basket for an absolute waterfall of color that stops visitors in their tracks. My tip: many modern trailing petunia varieties are wonderfully self-cleaning, meaning the spent flowers drop away on their own without deadheading. But if yours start to look a little tired and leggy by midsummer, don't be afraid to shear the whole plant back by about a third. Within 2 weeks, it will flush out with fresh growth and an entirely new wave of blooms. Generous, colorful, and endlessly blooming, petunias bring pure abundance to a container. Now let's add something smaller but just as prolific with number 3. Number 3 looks like a petunia's dainty little cousin, and it lives up to its charming nickname in the most delightful way: Calibrachoa, better known as million bells. Picture hundreds, genuinely hundreds, of tiny, perfect bell-shaped flowers, each one no bigger than a coin, absolutely smothering a compact trailing plant in colors ranging from sunny yellows and fiery oranges to deep reds, pinks, and rich purples. That name, million bells, isn't much of an exaggeration once a plant is in full swing. Because the individual flowers are so small and delicate, Calibrachoa brings a wonderfully fine, dainty texture to a container that contrasts beautifully against bolder, larger flowered plants. It shares many of the same needs as petunias: full sun, regular water, and consistent feeding to fuel all that non-stop blooming. But it has one particular gift. Calibrachoa tends to keep blooming reliably through summer heat that can sometimes slow down other flowers, making it a wonderful choice for a hot, sunny front porch that bakes in the afternoon sun. For your design, it's a beautiful trailing spiller in a mixed pot, cascading in a fine, delicate curtain over the edge, or massed on its own in a hanging basket for a dense, glowing ball of tiny blooms. My tip: unlike some petunias, Calibrachoa genuinely is self-cleaning. You'll almost never need to deadhead it since the spent flowers simply fall away cleanly on their own. Just keep up with the water and the feeding, since those hundreds of tiny blooms are hungry, thirsty work for such a small plant. Delicate, prolific, and heat-tolerant, Million Bells earns its cheerful name. Now let's bring in color that doesn't even need a single flower, with number 4. Number 4 proves that a container doesn't need flowers at all to be absolutely bursting with color: Coleus. Coleus is grown entirely for its foliage, and what extraordinary foliage it is! The leaves come in the most astonishing range of colors and patterns: deep burgundies and near blacks, fiery oranges and reds, lime greens, soft pinks, and dramatic combinations splashed and veined together on a single leaf, almost like something painted by hand. A single Coleus plant can bring more sustained color to a container than an entire pot of flowers, and unlike flowers, that color never fades or needs deadheading. It simply keeps growing more beautiful all season. Here's what makes Coleus especially valuable for a front entrance. Many modern varieties tolerate everything from full sun to quite a bit of shade, which makes it one of the most versatile plants you can choose for a container garden, especially on a porch that gets tricky, mixed light through the day. For your design, Coleus makes a wonderful, dramatic thriller, that taller centerpiece plant in a mixed container, especially the upright varieties, or use a mounding type as a bold splash of color mixed in among your flowering plants. A whole pot of nothing but Coleus, mixing 2 or 3 different colored varieties together, is stunning entirely on its own. My tip: Coleus does produce small flower spikes in late summer, but I'd actually recommend pinching those off as they appear. Once Coleus flowers, it puts its energy into seed production rather than those gorgeous leaves, and the whole plant can start to look leggy and tired. A little pinching keeps it bushy, full, and colorful right up until frost. Vivid, versatile, and entirely foliage-powered, Coleus proves you don't need flowers for color. Now let's add a tough, sun-loving bloomer that thrives on neglect with number 5. Number 5 is a genuinely tough, heat-loving butterfly magnet of a plant that thrives in a container with almost no fuss at all, Lantana. Lantana produces these charming little clusters of tiny flowers, often shifting through multiple colors within the very same cluster. A single bloom head might show yellow, orange, and pink all at once, like a little bouquet in miniature. It flowers with real abandon from late spring clear through to frost, and it does so while shrugging off heat, drought, and neglect better than almost any other flowering container plant on this list. If you tend to forget about your pots during a busy week, Lantana is remarkably forgiving of that. And here's a wonderful bonus. Lantana is an absolute magnet for butterflies. Plant a pot of it by your front door, and you'll find yourself with a steady parade of butterflies visiting all summer long, right at your own entrance. A lovely, lively bit of nature to enjoy every time you come and go. It wants full sun and, true to its tough nature, actually prefers the soil to dry out between waterings rather than staying constantly moist. Overwatering is far more likely to trouble Lantana than underwatering ever will. For your design, use a mounding variety as a bold, colorful filler, or choose one of the trailing varieties to cascade beautifully over the edge of a container or hanging basket. My tip: Lantana can get a little leggy and sprawling by midsummer, so don't hesitate to give it a good trim. Cutting it back by a third encourages fresh, bushy new growth and an entirely new flush of those charming, multicolored blooms. Tough, colorful, and beloved by butterflies, Lantana rewards even the busiest gardener. Now let's add some lush trailing foliage to fill out your pots with number 6. Number 6 is the plant that professional container designers reach for again and again to create that lush, overflowing, just tumbling out of the pot look: ornamental sweet potato vine. This is a vigorous, fast-growing, trailing foliage plant, grown purely for its gorgeous leaves rather than any flowers. It comes in several striking colors: a deep, glossy, near-black purple, a bright chartreuse lime green, and variegated types splashed with cream and pink. And it grows with real enthusiasm, quickly cascading over the edge of a container in long, lush trails that can stretch several feet by the end of summer. It is, without question, one of the very best spiller plants there is, filling out a container with volume and drama that few other plants can match so quickly. It loves heat and full sun to part shade, and it's genuinely easy to grow. Give it regular water and it will reward you with rapid, generous growth all season, requiring very little else from you. For your design, use the dark purple variety to add rich, dramatic depth to a container, or the lime green variety to brighten and lighten a planting. Both look absolutely stunning trailing down from a tall pot or spilling from a window box, especially paired with upright flowers like geraniums or lantana rising above them. My tip: if the vines start to grow so long they overwhelm their neighbors in the pot, simply snip them back to whatever length pleases you. Sweet potato vine takes pruning beautifully and will simply branch out fuller from the cut, rather than resenting the trim in the slightest. Lush, fast-growing, and dramatically trailing, sweet potato vine fills out a container like nothing else. Now let's add some graceful height and movement with number 7. Number 7 brings the same graceful movement we love in ornamental grasses down to a perfect container size: dwarf fountain grass. This compact ornamental grass forms a neat, arching, fountain-like mound of fine, graceful foliage, and by late summer it sends up soft, fuzzy, bottle brush-like plumes that catch the light beautifully and sway with the gentlest breeze. It brings texture and gentle motion to a container in a way that flowers and foliage plants alone simply cannot. There's something wonderfully alive about a pot that moves and rustles a little in the wind. Being a true grass, it's tough and easygoing, full sun, regular water, and really very little else required. It tolerates heat well and isn't fussy about soil, since most quality potting mixes suit it just fine. For your design, this is your thriller, the tall, dramatic centerpiece of a mixed container, surrounded by lower flowering plants like Calibrachoa or Lantana at its feet, with sweet potato vine trailing over the edge. That classic thriller-filler-spiller combination, with dwarf fountain grass as the thriller, is an absolutely foolproof container recipe that looks professionally designed every single time. My tip, because it's a perennial grass in many climates, if you'd like to keep it going year after year rather than treating it as a seasonal annual, cut it back to a few inches in late winter, just as you would for a grass in the garden, and it will flush out again with fresh growth come spring. Graceful, moving, and the perfect container centerpiece, dwarf fountain grass adds real design sophistication. Now let's bring some lush, shady elegance to a porch with number 8. Number 8 is the classic iconic plant of a cool, shady southern-style porch, and it brings a lush, elegant softness that few plants can match: the Boston fern. If you've ever admired a wide, welcoming front porch with graceful ferns hanging in the shade, softly swaying, you've seen a Boston fern doing exactly what it does best. It forms a full, cascading mound of finely divided, arching, deep green fronds that create an instant sense of cool, lush, established greenery. The kind of plant that makes a shady porch feel like a genuine retreat rather than just an entrance you pass through. Boston fern is very specifically suited to shade or bright indirect light. Direct, hot afternoon sun will scorch its delicate fronds quickly, so this is your perfect answer for that shady porch or covered entrance where sun-loving flowers would simply struggle and fade. It does ask for one important thing in return: consistent moisture and higher humidity than many container plants prefer. Ferns dry out and brown at the edges quickly if neglected, so this is a plant that wants regular, even daily attention to watering, especially in hot weather. For your design, it is absolutely made for a hanging basket, where those lush fronds can cascade freely all around, or in a tall pedestal planter that lifts it to eye level near the front door. My tip: mist the fronds occasionally or group it near other plants to raise the local humidity, and check the soil moisture daily in summer heat. Boston fern would genuinely rather be slightly too moist than too dry. If brown, crispy fronds do appear, simply trim them away at the base, and fresh new growth will fill in beautifully. Lush, elegant, and made for the shade, the Boston fern brings porch charm like nothing else. Now let's add a plant that thrives on almost total neglect with number 9. Number 9 is, without exaggeration, one of the toughest, most forgiving container plants that exists anywhere, and it has the most charming name to go with it: hens and chicks, botanically known as Sempervivum. This is a small rosette-forming succulent, and the delightful name comes from how it grows. A central hen rosette continually produces small, offset chicks clustered around its base, which slowly fills a pot with a tight, textural, almost geometric carpet of fleshy, pointed leaves. The rosettes come in wonderful colors: soft greens, dusty blues, deep burgundies, and rosy reds, and their perfectly symmetrical, almost architectural form adds a completely different kind of beauty to a container than any flower ever could. Here's why I adore recommending it, especially to anyone who's ever felt discouraged by killing container plants before. Sempervivum is nearly indestructible. It stores water in its thick leaves, so it's extremely drought-tolerant. In fact, overwatering is by far the most common way to lose this plant, not underwatering. It wants full sun and, above all, sharp, excellent drainage. It's also fully cold-hardy in most climates, meaning unlike so many of our other container plants, it can often survive right outdoors through winter in its pot, with no need to bring it in at all. For your design, use it in a shallow, wide container or a strawberry pot where those rosettes can spread and multiply across the surface, or tuck a few into the gaps of a larger mixed planting for wonderful year-round textural interest that holds up even when your flowers have finished for the season. My tip: use a well-draining succulent or cactus potting mix rather than regular potting soil, and water only when the soil is fully dry. When in doubt, always wait. This is the one plant on our whole list where genuine neglect is a virtue rather than a problem. Nearly indestructible and endlessly charming, hens and chicks reward even the most hands-off gardener. Now, for our 10th and final plant, one more tough, generous trailer to finish the list. Here it is. And here it is, number 10, a tough, generous, trailing bloomer that might just be the most forgiving flowering plant on this entire list, Verbena. Verbena produces dense, flat clusters of small, star-shaped flowers, most commonly in vivid purples and pinks, though whites and reds are lovely too, held above finely textured, slightly rough foliage on trailing, spreading stems. It blooms with real generosity from late spring right through to frost, and it does so while being remarkably drought-tolerant and heat-tolerant, genuinely one of the toughest flowering plants you can put in a container, thriving in exactly the hot, dry, sun-baked conditions that can defeat fussier flowers by midsummer. It loves full sun above almost anything else, and once established in its container, it wants the soil to dry out somewhat between waterings rather than staying constantly wet. A real gift for anyone who occasionally forgets to water over a busy weekend. For your design, Verbena is a beautiful trailing spiller, cascading gracefully over the edge of a pot or window box in a curtain of color, and it pairs especially well with the silvery, upright textures we haven't used much today, though it's equally stunning simply massed on its own in a single large pot by the door. My tip: Verbena appreciates a light trim partway through summer. If it starts to look sparse or leggy in the center, cut it back by about a third, and it will fill back in with fresh growth and a fresh flush of those cheerful, star-shaped blooms within just a couple of weeks. Tough, generous, and beautifully trailing, Verbena is the perfect forgiving finish to our container list. Now let's bring it all together. And there you have it, 10 wonderful plants for pots and planters, from classic geraniums all the way to that nearly indestructible Sempervivum. Garden bed or no garden bed, every single one of these will bring genuine color, texture, and life to your front entrance. Whether you've got a sprawling yard or just a single step and a doorstep. Here's my one parting design tip, the simple formula I mentioned along the way. For any mixed container, think thriller, filler, spiller. Something tall for height and drama in the center, something rounded and colorful to fill the middle, and something trailing to spill gracefully over the edge. Follow that simple recipe with any combination from today's list, and your pot will look professionally arranged every single time. So tell me down in the comments, do you have a garden bed, or is your space more of a porch, a patio, or a balcony like we talked about at the start? And which of these 10 are you adding to your pots this year? Share it with your growing zone, and let's make your entrance beautiful together, whatever space you're working with. And do go say a warm hello to a fellow container gardener down there in the comments. Some of the loveliest gardens I know exist entirely in pots, and I'd love for this little community to celebrate that. Coming up next, I'm putting together something truly special, 10 plants that will bring hummingbirds and butterflies right to your front yard, so you can enjoy nature's own little visitors every single day. So make sure you're subscribed with that bell turned on. Until next time, this is Eleanor. Keep your hands in the soil and your heart in the garden. Take care now. Bye-bye.